I'm a professor at the University of Toronto. David Trigg teaches at Ryerson University, and Richard Van Loon is former president of Carleton University and continues to teach there. So we think we know about universities, but interestingly, we've all spent many years in governments. Myself and Richard Van Loon in the federal government, David Trigg as Assistant Deputy Minister at both the Finance Ministry and the Ministry of Training and College and Universities. So we thought that between the three of us, we're well placed to understand both the government side and the university side, and to try to figure out options that a government could actually implement in a real province like Ontario, in the real world of the next 10 years.
Why are you proposing changes to the current university system in Ontario?
You know, our university system has some wonderful accomplishments. Over the past decade, we've asked it to take in 100,000 more students, and also to create the research that's going to drive our future economy. What we're concerned about is that in taking on those extra missions, part of what's been lost is the focus on student learning. And so we have huge incentives for professors to become great researchers, but really not very strong incentives for professors to focus on undergraduate teaching.
What do you recommend?
So 3 examples here. One is to change the way we fund our existing universities so it's possible for more faculty to devote more of their time to working with students rather than doing research, while at the same time providing the support we need to provide for the faculty who are the most productive researchers. Another possibility is that we ought to create a new credential at colleges that would make it possible for a student to attend college for 2 years and then to be qualified to start university in the 3rd year. So the student would automatically be qualified to enter 3rd year university without having to repeat any of the learning that the student has already done. Another possibility is we should consider creating some new university campuses that are focused on student learning, and where the faculty would be primarily responsible for student learning and would also have a research responsibility with respect to measuring the very best ways of improving students' education.
Relative to the rest of the world, and the rest of Canada for that matter, how is Ontario currently doing?
Increasingly, other jurisdictions are being very careful to measure what students actually learn. In Ontario, when we do a quality assessment, we tend to assess the inputs, that is, how much money is the university getting, but we don't assess very carefully at all the outputs, namely what are the students actually learning. Ontario's been very reticent about making changes in its higher education system. There haven't really been major changes since the late 1960s. The rest of the world is not standing still. There are reform movements occurring everywhere in the world, and unless Ontario pays more attention to the future and to reform movements, it's going to be badly left behind.
What can the rest of the world teach Ontario?
Undergraduate degrees are generally 3-year degrees, not 4-year degrees. And it's not because high school went on longer in other jurisdictions. It's because they have a more compressed and perhaps richer over that 3-year period. These are old and somewhat successful systems in almost every other jurisdiction, but when it comes time to change, other jurisdictions have been able to make those changes, and we certainly think Ontario should be able to do that too.
Why is it important to track student engagement and satisfaction?
We don't actually have long-term data on student engagement in Ontario, but there are a number of things happening that actually cause us to be quite concerned. We know, for example, that class sizes have been rising for a very long period of time. And so many universities, it's very common for particularly 1st and 2nd year students to spend a lot of their time in very, very large lectures. We also know that the number of courses that a full-time faculty member teaches has tended to decline over the past 20 years because faculty are expected to do so much more research. We know that students increasingly are faced with options where the university is, for example, reducing the length of its semester from 13 weeks to maybe 12 weeks. Students are spending more time with part-time faculty rather than full-time faculty. So all of these things are usually cause for concern. So we think we need to do better than this.
How do you link your proposed reforms to the future of Canadian productivity?
It's our contention that if undergraduates learn more regardless of what actual credential they get. If they learn more while they're at university, this will contribute not just to their own growth, but to the growth of the economy. That's the quality side. On the cost effectiveness side, a crucial matter is how many students can we educate. We know that the country, Canada, the province of Ontario, like the rest of Western democracies, are going to be faced with a real fiscal challenge over the next 5 to 10 years. The worst thing that could happen is for governments to restrict the number of people, of students who are enrolled. The best thing that could happen is finding cost-effective ways to produce this education for undergraduates.
How are Ontario universities currently held to account for their spending and the product that they put out?
Starting with the point that Ontario universities are paid by the government based on the number of people, the number of students who are enrolled, and the number of students they're teaching. So it's a pretty straightforward method of accountability at that level, and all Ontario universities have boards of governors who watch a lot of indicators carefully, and you can look on any Ontario University website and see the performance measures that are produced. What, as my colleagues have pointed out, no Ontario universities measure the actual learning achieved by their students in the ways that are now being begun to be done in the United States and in Australia are going to be required of all universities over the next few years. So that matter of accountability for outcomes, actual learning, is something that we would like to see more effort devoted to. One of the areas that Ontario is a leader in is the development of things called multi-year accountability agreements. So these are agreements where the government sits down each year, develops in this case a 3-year agreement to look at what the university would like to achieve and how it will do it, and then it's updated and examined each year. We think that this mechanism, which is now had 4 years of experience with in Ontario, can be used to develop and monitor measures that will improve the quality and cost effectiveness of undergraduate education.
What kind of role do you see for colleges in the reform of higher education?
We've identified in the book the need for several new undergraduate teaching-oriented universities. Some of our colleges might want to look at whether they're well qualified to take that on as an additional mission, and so to change what they currently do, so it's a mixture both of what they do today and also baccalaureate education. And there may be some colleges who are well prepared for that. That needs to be looked at on a competitive basis, along with other proposals for how those new university campuses might work.
Can Ontario afford to implement your proposals? Can it afford not to?
One of the things we know about university education is the cost grows every year, and in fact it's been growing more quickly than inflation for a very long period of time. So we have, from the students' perspective, students saying they really don't want to pay much higher tuition than they're already paying. And also from a government perspective, a government with a very large deficit that is going to have to do something about it. So there are a lot of reasons to think that we cannot look to new revenues as being the solution to all of our problems. One of the things we try to put forward in our book are some options for focusing more on what universities actually do, and particularly with respect to undergraduate education, how are students learning, how much are they learning, how do we know for sure that by the time they graduate that they have learned the things that they should expect from university education. So really our focus is how to use resources better, how to focus them more on student learning, because that's what students attend for and that's what we're going to need for our economic future.
Thank you for talking to us today, and good luck with the launch of your book.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.